Jonathan, nice to see you. There we go, I was muted. Nice to see you, Jonathan. Let me know if my sound is okay. I was having issues with it just a minute ago, but I think it's all right. Okay, good. I'm going to give just a minute or two before I get going. I was trying to, but right before the meeting, I need to figure this out actually when I have a lot more time. I was trying to figure out getting my desktop audio to also play so I could start like some lo-fi, like just background music or something for some ambiance. But I got it kind of working, but then my microphone quality was crap and all of that, so I just bailed on it. But I'll try and figure it out maybe later. Oh yeah, I have so many things right now open. So I have like a Zoom meeting open. I have a YouTube live stream thing to monitor the stream. I have like the chat for the YouTube live stream. I have, what else do I have? I have OBS, that like screen recording software, whatever. Yeah, tons of windows. I'm like bewildered. I can't keep track of what's going on in life. It's all right. I'm not a pro streamer, man. I don't know how those people do it. They must have their setup dialed in. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I hear you. I'll be doing that in this, so I'll just make sure and focus on that a little bit in this. I mean, it's going to be a heavy part of this negative shapes drawing as well as getting those measurements. So I'll just be sure to be explicit about them as I'm doing them. And then you could decide after the fact if you want, once we shut down, we could just stay on the Zoom. I'll just shut the live stream down. We could stay on the Zoom and chat about it as well. Because it's kind of, oh, probably 12 o'clock. Yeah, because then I'll have beginning students coming in. But um, yeah, that's fine. Hopefully, maybe I'll answer your questions, or maybe I'll like make it clearer as I go as to what I'm doing. But yeah, yeah. Are you using a phone, or are you putting it up on a? Oh, sweet. Yeah. So the difficulty is like you might be able to like stick your hand up and do this and like get a measurement, but then it's like, now what do I do with this? It's like it's not actually helping me on my drawing, and it's, yeah. The only thing that you can bring back to your page, I'll just dig into it right now while we're waiting for people to kick on. The only thing you can bring back down to your page is the comparison that you made up there. So if I'm looking at something, I have to go like, okay, my first measurement is like the size of, I'm looking at the drawing I'm going to be doing in a minute here, like the length from his elbow to his wrist. Okay, I have that measurement. Now what? It's like, that's the length of his elbow to his wrist as I see it. I have to compare, okay, that's elbow to top of head also. So now I know elbow to wrist is the same measurement as that elbow to the top of the head as well. So back at my drawing, I go, okay, here's my drawing reset. Here's my drawing's elbow to wrist. This is why I need a gesture or something on the page. Here's my gesture's elbow to wrist. But when I go elbow to head, my head is way higher, right? So I know according to the drawing, or according to the reference I had, and this works the same in life, according to the reference, that head should be landing right here where the tip of this thing is, but I've got it way high. I need to move it down into that spot. Yeah, it's all relationship based. There is a method where you transfer the direct measurements, but you have to be right up on your model, or else it doesn't work very well. So for our purposes, and we're kind of doing it more intuitively than mathematically like that anyway. For our purposes, we bring the comparisons back. So, and the easiest things to find are horizontal relationships. Like when I just go straight horizontal on this drawing, the knee, the hip, the other elbow, and part of the whatever lines up all along that horizontal, and you just check your drawing for the same thing. Does that help? Yeah. You have to reset every time. And that's why I encourage people to just find like exact or near things. So like in that case, I found elbow to wrist is the same as elbow to head. That's easy to transfer because I know they should be the same. It gets more difficult when you start counting like, okay, elbow to wrist is 1, 2, 3 times into the height. Then you come back to your drawing. You get used to it and you get better and better at doing that. But for now, just like look for things that are the same and make sure they're the same in your drawing, if that makes sense. All right. And you'll see me doing that here as well, though I probably will be counting also because I'm going to be dealing with some weird shapes. All right. I'm going to go ahead and kick off into some gestures. For the purposes, so I've decided to start leaving these live streams up. Hopefully it doesn't kill the attendance on them. I think I have one person on Zoom and one person viewing on YouTube. That's good enough for me. I'm going to leave them up for people to view later. I say that because now I'm only going to do covered models, even though I prefer to be able to see the whole figure anatomically and everything, but for YouTube restriction purposes, I'm going to leave it on covered models only, much as I might not want to. When you're practicing gestures at home, I would practice with, you could do covered models, it's just fun, it's fine, but I would do nude and covered models because clothing can obscure a lot of structure that you should know and should be comfortable with. And so if you never draw it or never deal with it in gesturing or anything, it can really disjoint the way you draw because you'll be drawing a torso that you can see, and then you'll draw a big piece of clothing and then legs coming out the bottom, and you won't connect those legs to the rest of the body in a convincing way. So anyway, make sure you're practicing from nude models and from costumed models. All right. All right, and I've got these set for 2 minutes. I'm using vine charcoal today, so I'm going to do vine charcoal and maybe smear between takes, so to speak. Hear my daughter having fun in her school. I don't know if you can hear that, but This is one where the pants want to introduce a weird, like sharp angle right there that's made from like this fabric stretching, and it can really, that will need to be there at some point, but it can also distract from the flow that you're looking for. There's like a really cool line here from the chin down the neck, down the middle of the body. It's like the chin connects to the neck, which connects to like that pit of the neck here, which we'll talk about when we get to anatomy. Down that center line of the body, there's like that snaking line. Then that shoulder and the rest of this stuff exists above it. I just took a trip down through the body, so from like the top of the head, like this is the back of the head maybe, through the spine, down that leg maybe to the knee, and then down, and then maybe foot's there. That's kind of like the path I went through as like the very first little investigation there. Part of that back lobs out. It doesn't, exaggerating here is actually a good idea. And see, we have the feel of the pose here. It's chaos, it's mess. There's nothing really clarified, but it's got that hunch and that twist and that stuff. That it's got the flow that I'm looking for in that gesture, and it happens pretty quick. I mean, this one was a minute or so. So I want to deviate for a second. Well, I'll do it on the next one and sort of explain what I'm like. This arm here, that's plenty for a gesture. I haven't drawn an arm. I did something and it feels the way that arm kind of feels, and so I'm happy with it. Right? It's not really a stick figure. It's not really a contour line drawing. It's something else. It's like an investigation of the way that pose feels. I'm getting a lot of gestures back that are kind of like this. You can already tell I'm off base, right? Like I'm right? This isn't a gesture. This is me focusing, so it's got the pose is kind of there, but it's hyper focused on these contours, these things, and the idea that I'm going to make these bold statements and just be like, now I'll go about fixing things. It's really kind of hard to do when you've done this. Like if I measure this arm and it needs to go in a whole different spot, or sizes of things are weird, it's going to be really hard for me to go, oh, okay, then the back needs to move out like this. It's going to start getting confusing and not be as effective. It doesn't have the flow, the continuity that the other gesture had. It feels like a stiff and somewhat awkward version of this pose. I think the one saving grace in this is at least this leg has a little bit of S to it, so it feels kind of natural there, but It's just too focused on those outer contours like that. And that's just, not only is it stressful, I mean, heck, I'll start getting like this kind of thing. Fingers and toes and then like eyes and stuff. And it's just, that's just too much. Too much detail, too much contour edges, too much clarity in those edges. It doesn't look like you're investigating things. It looks like you're making a bold statement. This is where I stand. Whereas like this one, it's like, okay, arm. I might look at it for a second and go, if I come down this arm, I go through like this and then it shoots down to that leg, which is unfortunately cropped in the photo, but it's like, ignore the body. I have this kind of thing going on. And then it, maybe this goes straight. That's kind of like the overall map of the way things are flowing for me right now as I interpret this. And I can flesh that out over the next 2 minutes to be like, there's a little elbow bit there, but that arm kind of just, I like it being a C curve all the way down to the armpit. Some sense of fabric here. I can kind of find things based on those flows. I like to come off the shoulder and down and then up bump for the forearm and down. And there's like a little thumb or whatever, but I'm not gonna fixate on it. I'm not going to focus on this big wedge of fabric that comes down. Like that front leg is really bonkers. I'm thinking about like, what is the leg doing? It's really tempting in these gestures to draw stuff like the face on this mask, for instance, but just remember, we're not into drawing the details. If you like the way it looks and you really want to draw it, you're like, man, I must draw this. Feel free, just don't do it as a gesture, or just don't turn it in as a gesture. Draw it on your time when you're There's an S curve right in there that's kind of nice. I'm looking at this hand, it's like facing away from me, but it's all the fingers follow this kind of curved feel. So that's where this curve is coming from. It's like the dish of the hand, and then like thumb would be out like that. I'm not in the business of drawing a hand right now. And be like, does it have the feel that pose felt? Does it feel like I felt? All of my corrections are yet to come. All of my tightening things up and making them feel just right. Right? I think a lot of times people get hung up in that first gesture of like, stuff doesn't look great. And it's like, that's a lot to load. That's a lot to load onto yourself in the first 2 minutes of a drawing. heel to toe thing there. One thing I notice about this leg, and this is something you might notice about legs generally, and I always kind of like to play it up when I do notice it, is that the inner part of the leg is almost a straight line. It's got a little bit of curvature to it that you could accentuate later, but like the inner part of this leg is kind of a straight line, and the outer part has all of that curviness to it, right? So it's be on the lookout, especially for standing, like straight standing poses. Where am I going to get my curve from? A lot of times the inner thigh, inner leg is kind of a straighter shot with a little bit of curvature, and this outer part of the leg, you get these more drastic curves. I'm going to lengthen this leg just a little bit, just to make it feel a little more perched. I'm being pretty bold with this vine charcoal, so you'll see me making these dark line statements, kind of. Be careful in your drawing if you're using a charcoal pencil or something. Maybe I'll do a couple of gestures with this real quick, just because with vine I can just make it go away. But with this pencil, if I lay down a bold line like I have been, it's not going to go away so easily. So I gesture a little bit differently. I'm a little more aggressive and a little more freeform with the vine charcoal. With the pencil here, same ideas are in play. I'm just much, much lighter touch with it. And this is a well-sharpened pencil also. I like that trip. It's like a C curve to start, and then it goes whoop and flips down S to the knee pit. It has kind of a nice feel to it. Also the top of the calf, like starting out like this and then a drop down. It's just a long, big long S there. This front, I can almost just reduce it to one big C curve. Again, this is not my statement of fact, like this is where things are. It's just grabbing a feel of things. So I did that nice and light, like I could still come on top of this and put much more specific statements in. But it does take practicing with a light hand if you're using the pencil to really build the drawing up versus go all out right off the bat. I'll use the pencil again here. I kind of like to take, like in this pose, for instance, coming down the front of the chest, down through the front of the thigh, and then a flip out for like the back of the calf. It's like that's the trip down that body that feels nice, and I'm gonna build off of that. It was like big C curve for the back of the arm, sort of bouncing S curve for the front of the arm. This is another one where it's like you have this long sort of straightish thing, and then you have this lots of curvature there. You have this long sweeping thing, and then this more curvature there. Hopefully this is how your gesture sessions at home feel. I get the sense that there may be some people who are finding them stressful and time consuming, and it should be much more of a throw on some music and investigate and play kind of a thing. It should really be a warm up in that regard. I'm not grading them based on, to be honest, the gestures I'm grading on did you or did you not do it, and that's pretty much it. I might throw commentary in like, oh, hey, be careful to not whatever. But this is practice. It's not about making it look perfect. It's about getting comfortable with this process. So while I will offer those pointers, I'm not like, these gestures don't look good enough, minus X number of points. No, not for the gestures. Something there, fist down to hand. I always like to play a little connect the dots type game with things like hands and stuff. Like, I know it doesn't look at here, but there's like fist there, hand there. If I'm finding one, I'm just gonna like visually drop to the other and indicate it. That relationship is easy to kind of just grab as you're gesturing, as long as you're looking for it. And then it's there when you go to draw, you're like, okay, you can assess it and be like, yeah, that's pretty much where they were. And you can see, again, I didn't draw anything that's specifically hands. It's just kind of generally, this is what's going on. I'll throw that chair in. $10.28, we'll call it at this one. There's like a sharpness to that hand. I did like his knuckles ride up. They ride up and drop down. So I'm just going to throw that in there as like that's what the hand feels like. It's like 4 scribbles. Maybe sometimes like in this one, there's a little S curve for the palm. Sometimes it's nice to get that, but I'm not going to go much. I don't want to lock into like saying this is exactly what the arm is doing, but here's some elliptical masses that are really nice, like shoulder to upper arm. That's what those two like masses feel like. So looking through the arm and just going, oh, there's a round thing here and a round, looks like a peanut almost with a little like sharp bottom. That's going to help me keep that arm in the right position. Still might need to be fixed later, but the more you practice looking for these little, I don't know what, these things, the more you develop like a set of preferences on how to describe stuff, the easier gesture gets, because you kind of have some go-to things you like to do or ways of describing stuff. So let's call it there. All right, so I feel reasonably warmed up. Where are we at here? All right, so this is going to be the pose that I use. As always, you have your own set of poses in the references. Please draw from those. It helps. There are several reasons for that. You can practice on all other ones that you find that you want. You can practice along with me on this one if you like. What you turn into me should be from that list of references. One, it helps me assess how things went much better. If you pick a random photo, I can be like, here's the stuff that stands out as being awkward. But in the references that I give, you can kind of see some common issues. It's quicker and easier for me to assess them. Part two of that is you can have some like commiseration with other students in the discussion posts in the critique section. And that's kind of probably the more important one, is that you can be like, oh man, and I saw it in the last discussion, the last critique discussion as well. People being like, oh, I had that one too, and it was a killer, and I finally just ended up, whatever. Oh, with that pose, here's what worked for me, kind of stuff. It's more helpful to sort of be in it with some other people. So for that reason, if you would be so kind, not if you would be so kind, make sure and use the references from the list, because otherwise I'll be like, hey, this isn't from the list, and then you'll have to turn in one that is from the list. Just going to rearrange my windows real quick. All right, that's doable. Okay, so I'm going to come back to the vine here, and this might be a good idea for you as well, because the vine charcoal is going to get out of the way. So I can make clear statements about the negative shapes that I'm going to be looking at, because and without the vine interfering, without the previous drawing interfering. If you don't have vine charcoal, one, I would get it so you can get used to the way it behaves. You can do fully finished drawings with vine charcoal, and they happen quickly. You can really manage your smoothness and transitions really well with vine charcoal. It's very fast to build up the shading and stuff with it, as well as it's really great for gesture. If you've never used it before, you can be like, I don't like it, it's messy, or it seems weird, and I'm not going to use it. Don't do that. Broaden your horizons. If all you have is the pencil, make sure in this drawing that you're developing that drawing very lightly at first, because you're going to need room to make those clear statements. All right, gesture. First thing I notice is this stick that goes almost through the whole pose at this kind of an angle. So that's going to be one of my guiding principles in this drawing, is that stick. It's going to help me orient the rest of the figure. The rest of it's kind of like this. If I do an envelope on this pose, because it's not really a closed pose, but it feels like it could use an envelope, kind of like that. There's an opening here and there. This is where, in this drawing, this is where we'll get into trouble if we start drawing specifics, because this is a negative shapes drawing. We're not actually drawing the figure here. We're just drawing the negative shapes. So what I need to do is, in the gesture stage, I need to not lock into anything really specific. Making sure that trip from the hand down to the toe feels reasonable. Then from foot down to these legs of the stool, it's almost like I can just draw a swoop line that picks up both of those legs. And then my original triangle statement kind of stands, I think. If I go stick to head, it's like this. Head to wrist is like that. So I'm kind of just refining this envelope a little bit. Okay, I think I'm going to call that my starting gesture. I'm going to ghost it, that's what I call it. Just get that vine charcoal out of the way. You can do this if you've gestured with like a medium charcoal pencil. You can still ghost it, but it doesn't go back doesn't fall away nearly as easily. All right, and please take your time doing this. So I'm on a time constraint with this live stream. I mean, I can only reasonably spend 40 minutes on this drawing or so. Please take time on yours. So my 40 minutes are going to have all of my practice over the years built into them. So I'll be making decisions that seem like, oh, that was easy. But it's because of the practice I don't have to spend as much time deliberating as you might want to really make sure that you get this dialed in. All right, so for negative shapes, where I start, I'm going to pick the easiest shape that I can manage, or just one that seems kind of straightforward to me. And for me, it's, you can't see my mouse, but this shape underneath the elbow, that's kind of like a arrowhead. It's like a weird shaped pointy arrow or something. I'm going to start there because it just seems, it's kind of centrally located. It seems manageable. I'm going to check real quick on the drawing. So I'm just going to measure where is that shape relative to the whole drawing. Is it exactly like hovering at the halfway point? Is it a little high? Is it a little low? Because I might move it right now depending on what I come up with. So let's find out. If I go, I'm just going to measure from the bottom of the stool to the middle-ish of that shape and then pop that measurement up one and see what I see. So on the reference, going to the middle of that shape from the stool sends me right up to the elbow. So this distance should be the same as the elbow. So already I feel like this is kind of too high, right? Or my stool comes down too low, right? I need this shape to sit such that there's where I roughly have my elbow. So like elbow to this shape vertically. Move my camera back just a little bit so you can see it better. All right, so elbow down to wherever the middle of this shape is, which is like there-ish. Should be the same as that down to the stool. So that's kind of that's a good measurement. So I do need to move this shape I made earlier. I just need to move it down a tad to start with. So I'm just going to re-gesture a similar kind of little shape, just a little bit lower. That's going to be roughly where my shape, instead of up here, it's just down a little bit. Ghost that. So now I feel okay with this shape starting off. And so to start this shape, I'm going to do a straight line block in kind of thing. And I would encourage you to do a straight line block in for the whole drawing. If you look at the example above the assignment instructions, it's a straight line block in, perfectly good. I would prefer to see that because you can really lose a lot in this drawing if you just make these smoochy, curvy lines that don't describe things very well. Right? Curves are okay if you can be really specific with them, but it's easy to be specific with curves when you've done the work of mapping them out in straight lines first. So best to just leave it straight lines for now. Anyway, it also helps me make this shape because if I look at like the top point to this next point, it's at an angle kind of like this. Out, down, out like this. Kind of straight-ish like that, and then it cuts off. All right, so that's kind of the shape that I see, but I don't trust this shape yet. This is my first lay-in of it. I need to check some things first to make sure I trust this. Once I trust this shape, like I've measured, remeasured, double-checked, triple-checked, I feel really good about this shape, I can use it to start making judgments about all other shapes and build this out reasonably. But I have to trust it first. I can't just go willy-nilly or my drawing's going to get out of whack. So the first thing I want to do is just the overall size. So like the size of this shape. Can I find anything in my gesture that confirms the size of this shape? Generally, I can't do it exact yet, but I can get to where I feel good about the size. So I'm going to measure from here and maybe just like check it against, it looks like in the gesture it's about the same as, so this empty space, this negative space, is about the same as this front of the stomach to the back, maybe a little bit shorter. So I'm just going to check the reference and see what I get. So already, when I check the drawing with this measurement and then go like that, the back is like right here. It's not out so far. So that tells me I've either made this too short this way or this back is too wide, one of the two. I kind of like the way the gesture feels, so something tells me that I've made this too short this way. So I'm going to figure out, well, what do I need to do then? I need to make it longer. Do I want to make it longer this way? Do I want to make it longer that way? I'm going to go vertical from this just to get an alignment. Like when I go straight up from, say, this point, what do I run into? In the drawing, I run into like the back of the head-ish. And these are all generic, or they're all general. I haven't dialed anything in yet, but I'm circling the drain, right? Or not the drain, I'm circling my prey. Like I'm like zoning in on it. When I go up from that point, it goes kind of right through the back of the head, so I feel reasonable about that. If I go from like this part of that shape straight up, it runs right through that negative shape for the arm, so that arm's going to have to come this way eventually. I feel reasonable about this relative to the head. Let me just check the head. Like right now I've got it, if I go vertical, it goes through that shape and down like next to this stool or something. Head through that shape, down. I feel reasonable about the vertical alignment of head, shape, and stool. So I'm going to say this side of it is fine. I'm going to check the front end here. It lines up with the back of the leg here and passes right in front of the nose. So if I go back of leg, it's through that point right in front of where I could imagine the nose being. So now I have a quandary. I was like, I need to stretch this shape out because I've made it too short when I measure up there. But when I run my vertical alignments, they line up really nicely. So I don't want to make it bigger because that's going to mess up all my vertical alignments. So what's my option? Well, my option is to make it thinner this way, right? Which will make it proportionally, it'll make it seem as wide as it needs to be. And it also kind of doesn't confirm to me, it disagrees with me that this feels good, right? If this is the right width relative to my vertical measurements and stuff, or my vertical alignments. So when I ran vertical alignments through the head and I did all of that measuring, this shape's width felt good. Okay, then that tells me, you know what? Even though I don't want to, the back comes through there. Something in my brain says, don't do that. It's too thin. But when I measure it up there, this to that, it does almost exactly what it's doing here. So that's just a couple of different things that told me this is too far out. All right, so then I believe it. All right, I'm going to check the width here. I'm just going to see like from this point here to that point there, how does it compare to like the overall shape? 1, 2, maybe a tiny bit more than 2. This is that counting, Jonathan, I was talking about a second ago now. I'm taking the height of this and going in the drawing, it's once, twice, and a tiny bit until I hit that line. What does it do in the reference? There's that length, and it goes once, twice, and maybe a little bit more. So it was like once, twice. I feel pretty good about that, actually. That's close to what I see when I check the reference. So on the reference, when I checked this, it went once, twice, maybe a tiny bit more, but it's close. It's within my margin of error. So I'm going to say the general width here to the general width there checks out with what I see on the reference. And I know that I kind of caught in the process of getting to this, I also caught that this needed to move in. All right, I'm going to do one thing before I solidify this shape. I'm just going to compare it to this next shape that happens below the hand. Because what might happen, having moved this back in, what might happen is it's going to push my whole figure over, and then my hand's going to get cut off on the edge of the page. I'm going to have this big blank nothing on this edge, and the figure is going to cram against the edge of the page here, and I don't want that. So I'm just going to check it to see, maybe it'll land just fine, and then in which case I'm fine. Maybe it will seem to run me off the page, in which case I need to move some stuff. And I'm just going to check this width against the width of the shape right next to it. They look roughly similar to me, but I'm just going to double check. Width of that shape. Oh, good. The width of this shape. So if I take the width of this shape, let me just double check. I'm going to use my skewer because it's easier to get a clear measurement. All right, so if I take this shape like that and then turn it just like this, it goes right to the end of the hand. All right, the outer edge of the hand, which means this negative shape here has to exist within this spot. So I actually feel really good about that. Triple check. Yeah, it might even be a little bit wider. So I'm not going to run off the page is what it looks like. And that hand is kind of the farthest thing this way, and it's going to stop right about here and head back in. So I'm okay with that. This is a lot of deliberation, even for me right at the start, but it's so that I can get this shape in as nicely as I can, because I'm going to be basing a lot of my decisions going forward on this shape. And if I flub this now, then every decision after that is going to be similarly flubbed or have problems. So best to spend the time on this one. All right, so now I'm going to refine this shape. Let me check this little cut in I have. I'm saying that it happens like a third of the way over, maybe a little more. It's almost half, but when I look up there, I don't trust that. So I'm going to measure this line right there and see, how does it compare to that? In the drawing, they're the same, this and that. And then it's like 1 and a bit along that side one. So let's see. In the reference, 1, close. Okay, I feel good about it. That's pretty close to when I turned this sideways on the reference, it was about the same as that. And when I came down here, it was like one of these plus a little bit more. So I feel good about that. So now I'm going to solidify this shape. Here's where I click into careful mode. I'm looking at the white shape. I'm not trying to draw wrinkles or anything like that. I'm literally just drawing that white shape. The figure doesn't exist for me right now. There's this kind of zigzag thing going on. This is your opportunity to lose detail. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 angle changes just across that stomach. So maybe I can move it closer, you can see. That's 6 different changes of angle that I saw just looking at that stomach, I'm going to call it, but it's the right top edge of that negative shape, really. all too often what I see in these drawings is instead of something that's really deliberate like that, I see one line, just one straight line. That's what I have in my little block in to start with, not nearly enough clarity to pull off this silhouette with. So be careful when you're doing these that sometimes a long straight line is called for. More often than not, you miss things if you edit out way too much if you just do long straight lines. Again, just looking at, if I were looking at the knee, my brain would want me to go straight down off the knee because legs go straight down. When I look at that negative shape, this slants backwards like that. All right, and I'm looking at the negative shape here, not the positive shape. All right, here's another one where it's really tempting to just go straight line all the way to this point. I feel good about where the point is. I feel good about where that is, but what about the line between them? If I look at it, it's not perfectly straight. There's a little break. If this is the overall line, it goes, psh. There's just a little bit of break, and it happens like, I hope you can see it. It happens like right here. So it goes out like that, and then down. That is not a perfectly straight line. It goes out and then it breaks slightly. You would be surprised how important that kind of stuff is. So just make sure you're being deliberate. I can trust this to be a perfectly straight line. I might want to check the angle. So Jonathan, this is another thing that you can do is like this angle, it's like if it was a clock, it would be what? Not quite 2 o'clock. It's like 12, 1, maybe 2 o'clock. Do I see that up there? I have it a little too flat here. It's more like, yeah, it sits more like this. And I've kind of overplayed my hand there. Don't get overly excited about erasing. But if you need to make a clearer statement, there we go. All right, up this arm. There's a sharp, and I say arm, but that's not correct. It's the top edge of this white shape, right? I have to remember that I'm looking through the model here. If I start looking at the arm, my chances of drawing this overlap up into the armpit and stuff increase, and we're not drawing none of that. We're not drawing any of that. We're just drawing the white shape. All right. Okay. Just double checking. There's a sharp thing there. So for this, I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 angle changes in that little section. And that gives me, there's a little bone in the elbow right there that it's giving me. There's a little bit of muscle that's being pushed out by that stick that little angle break is giving me. So you don't have to know the anatomy, but look for the angle breaks because they're going to give you structure you might not otherwise know about or might not otherwise get. All right, so I feel good about that. Now I can start kind of basing my other negative shape decisions off of it. I'm going to do this one next, right out in front of it. I know this leg is continuous, so that tells me that this white shape and this arm is continuous more or less. So that tells me what these two shapes are going to be doing as far as relationships here. There's going to be a sense that this shape picks up again right there as it goes down. Right? It's a mistake to just draw that leg all the way through and then erase that little bit. It shows me that you're not looking at the negative shape, you're looking at the positive stuff. And what's going to come along with all that positive shape stuff is all of your preconceived notions about what things should be like. I'm finding this little under the palm angle. I'm keeping this really generic for now. That's roughly what that shape looks like to me. And it does continue, like there's a tiny little sliver of it that continues out into this big area. I'm just going to treat it like an independent, I'm going to treat it like those two things are fused right now, deal with this shape. And then when I firm them up, I might just make it part of the overall shape. Or I might just scoot a finger and close that shape off so I have another floating negative shape to describe things with. This feels like it's in the wrong spot to me. Yep, should be over like that. I am going to close that off because it feels good to have this shape floating as well. All right, I'm going to speed things up just a little bit just for time. I may not finish this drawing here, but hopefully it'll give you an idea of roughly where we're at. This is my generic. So I've got this big generic shape I'm starting that I can make some judgments about. So I can check, okay, I'm saying this is this shape, just generically, haven't done details yet. How does it compare to the ones I feel good about? Well, one thing I can do is just go in the drawing, the width of this one, and again, this is the one I trust. It's like a little less than 2, or maybe like 1.5 to even with roughly where those fingers are, kind of just generally speaking. 1, and it goes 1, and that's about what I see. I'm going to double check that. Let's see here. Boom. Goes roughly midway and then up to roughly where the hand is. Boom. Maybe a little higher than midway. So this might be just a little bit long. But it's pretty close. All right, so now I'm going to add some more specifics to this shape. Take as much time as you feel you need to get things correct. There's some interesting stuff happening right here along the top. I'm referring to the model, but what I'm looking at, what I'm trying to draw is the negative shape here. So when I say like there's interesting stuff in the top of the foot, it's only to show you what I'm talking about. I guess what I should say is there's interesting stuff happening on the bottom edge of this negative shape. There's a little bump out like that. Down, zag out. There's some definite zigzagging happening here. What's this? It's just part of my envelope, so I'm just gonna firm it up. Doesn't necessarily have to be anything specific. I want to get some of this. So we're going to read this as a hand when I'm through. So I want to get some of these different angle changes. So I notice there's a little one there. that little zigzag, boom, boom, boom. There's another one that comes out like this and up. And then the zigzags are kind of gentler over here. And where should I stop my shape? I'm just going to stop it roughly there. Right. Those little jut outs are going to help this negative shape against that negative shape feel like fingers. All right, what next? We have a big shape down here, and I'm going to find some of the points of it first, so I kind of know where to take it. If I go like straight down through here, like vertically aligned, like where is that little hook? It's in the gesture. Where is it exactly? Vertically, it happens in front of both of these points, so I know my vertical alignment is going to be out in front of those two. Horizontally, it happens below. It's like almost right through this point. So it's about where I intuitively have it here, this way and this way. Let me just check the distance here against something I trust. It's the same as that. Yeah, I feel good about right there for that. Where's this point of it? If I go straight up from that point, it goes right through the sort of center of this shape. So it's like right there. Is it above or below that one? Oh, see, my brain wanted me to go down to it, but it's actually slightly above. It's on the incline, so it's like it's up from it. Let me check I'm going to check the distance here against something I trust. There we go. It's exactly the same as that. Okay, so now I double trust this higher point. It gives me the rise that I saw, and it's the right distance from that. And vertically, I'm straight below there. So I've kind of triangulated this point. If I would have just gone with my original one, it probably would have looked okay, but it wouldn't have been as accurate or deliberate as it could be. Let's say so there's 1, 2, 3 angle changes. I feel like we'll do the job there. Generically, this comes down like this and out. This one does the opposite. Boom. This is what that centerpiece looks like, and I can just do a couple of measurements real quick to see, how close am I, how good is it. This feels, I'm on the lookout here for stuff that feels awkward. This feels awkward to me, like awkwardly too thin. Right, and this shape isn't quite exactly what I'm seeing either. Yeah, I think I'm going to get rid of that bump for now and just do a straight line based on what I see. It is like that. Yeah. I'll clean this up later. Now this line is getting fuzzy and indistinct, so I need to make that clear, but I want to get things placed reasonably before I make a statement about it. I'm going to check this, like this point, like if I go straight from this intersection over, measure how wide is it till I hit that line going this way. It is the exact same as this. So boom, boom. So I was a little out there, and truth be told, I think I was a little too angled that way as well. And I'm going to stop my shape here. And I think just for the sake of making this feel like a foot entirely, I'm going to get like a little bit, and this might be where I need to zoom in on this or something, a little bit of zigzag there. Just a little floating shape there. So you can see it's like shape, shape, shape. I haven't drawn the toes in. I've just kind of drawn the negative shapes near enough to each other to start feeling like there's a foot there. This isn't an easy thing, by the way. I do realize that. It can be hard to trust yourself. Boy, I keep coming back to this measurement is really helping me out. This distance here is like, I'm finding all kinds of things that are the same as that. And so as long as I keep referring to that as my base, whenever I find something that's that width, I can plop it in and I feel a lot better. Let's see this. There. So the length of this part of this negative shape here is the same as this. Boom. Boom, which puts that here and at kind of an angle like this. So this line was a bit premature. It's more like that. It's like a big, like a tall A shape here. The tiny little shape above it. This is where we'll get into trouble as well. This is going to have me wanting to draw the stool, right? I almost just carried this line all the way down to where the leg is, but I'm not drawing the stool. I'm drawing this long, thin negative shape. And I can kind of base like this. It ends right here, somewhere in the middle of this A shape. And then there's another shape that picks up. I'm ignoring the cloth, by the way. Another shape that picks up and carries along this bottom edge like that. Where does it end? Something tells me. Oh, it's not quite that length. It's like there. It's not quite the full length of that shape. Again, I've been using this bottom edge, like that point to that point. I've been using that non-stop for the most part. And that's a good thing. Like that's going to keep me consistent. Let's see, that goes more or less straight. straight in and up. There's like an hourglass shape right here. Really helpful to not focus on what it is I'm trying to draw and instead focus in on what it is that I'm actually seeing in that negative shape. This is like a long flat shape with a little hook on the end. So I freeformed it here for a little bit. I suspect I'm going to be running into trouble here in a second. I've widened these shapes up. So I started going off the cuff, just making these shapes as I went without necessarily measuring them back to each other. And what's going to happen, I'll sort of predict what's going to happen if I don't fix it now, is when I take like the width, so from this point of this shape back to the point of this shape, I end up with that distance, which is about the same as the distance of this shape, of this first negative shape. So when I check the drawing for that same relationship, this point should be happening right here, which tells me I've stretched a lot of this stuff out because I didn't measure it as I was going. I kind of drew as I went. In the stool, that's not going to make that big of a deal, make that much of a difference or be that big of a deal. But what's going to happen is I'm going to come up here and start drawing the back of this model as a negative shape. And when I get there, I'm going to have been significantly wider here than I should have been. So when I get up here and start heading this direction, that model's back is going to be extraordinarily wide, right? Because what my negative shapes are telling me is that from here up, it's like there, up and there. I'm back to my original line that I said was too wide, plus some, right? So then my model's going to feel like a big old flobbed out hunchback kind of model. So the remedy for that is I'm going to take this kneaded eraser and just ease up some of those decisions and fix them. Well, I was real confident with some of those. This one is about holding myself accountable. In the course of a normal drawing, you'll be drawing the figure and you'll flip-flop between looking at these negative spaces and looking at the figure and looking back at the negative spaces to keep you in check. This drawing is about all negative spaces, all negative shapes, and forcing yourself to be careful and be deliberate with them. And if you find that you've done something wacky, you fix it. And it's that fixing it that your brain doesn't like to, it doesn't like falling down, so to speak. So you do something that makes you fall down enough times, you start to program in how not to fall. Right? I'm a snowboarder, so the first 2 times I went, I just tumbled down the mountain at great physical expense, super painful, headaches, muscle sore for weeks or whatever. You program into your brain what's not comfortable, and it finds those pathways to keep you from falling. The drawing's no different. The more except for that you can escape the pain easier, right? The more you force yourself to change something and go, that's crap. And you don't like to spend that much energy. You can feel it when you go to change something. You're like, I don't want to do it. It's unpleasant, but you make yourself do it. And you do that enough times, you start to not make as many of those mistakes, to be honest. So I still make the mistake. I'll still stop myself and fix it. So ought you. So I'm going to say this point can be no longer than there. That's where I put it before. So that's way thinner than it looks like to me up there. Just going to double check. Man, for whatever reason, I just so don't trust that. And then I measure it and it totally is the same. Oh, from there. Oh, I have no choice. Oh, I don't want it to be true, but it's true. Okay, so I've stretched things. Time to go back and just find out what is it that I've stretched. And something tells me it's the cumulative effect of this and this and this and this. All of them just stretched more and more and more as I went. The bottom of there is still pretty good. All right, top of this, what can I find that's that? The height of this. So that is all the wider that is. I'm going to start up here, but these decisions are undoubtedly going to flow downhill and affect these ones as well. Ooh, something tells me this is a spot I got in trouble, so no. Let's see. That's barely. It's like that and that. That whole space is the same as the width of that. So boom, boom, cut in a little less than half. All right, next one. The width of that leg is only slightly wider than that, and that's the one that I flubbed. So I think this line is in the right spot, but I said legs are wide, and I made it wider than the other shapes, and I shouldn't have. It's actually not so much wider. Just a tad wider. Downplay some of these older mistakes. I'm not too worried about these lines, these mistake lines. I'm going to make these clearer statements by the end and be back on track. That means all of that needs to go. All right, so from that to the hip. All right, that was uncomfortable, but we got there. I might still come back in and dress that up a little bit later. We'll see how it goes. So if I go up the middle back, up the back, it kind of goes up and then kind of arcs over to the elbow. Okay. And the top of that stick maybe slightly less. All right, I'm gonna wrap it up here in a second because there's not much time. I'm going to pretend this line that I made out to the end of that stick that's just my envelope. Oops. That part's just my envelope. So I kind of have to invent what this negative shape is doing there, like how close this is to that. Kind of doesn't matter. I just need to make sure it's following the right angles and that the points of the angles of these shapes line up with what I've previously done. So where is this? Somewhere in here, there's like a joint. There's like an angle change where that arm comes in. It's like a boom, boom, like that. Where is that point? I'm going to go back to my original shape. Ooh, that's pretty nice. Let's plus some. So it's like this, then up, then plus some. It's like that. It's that distance from that point plus a bit. That distance up plus a bit, maybe plus a bit more. This isn't an exact science, obviously. You're doing comparative measurements, so you're just trying to you're getting sensitive to comparing what am I seeing. So when I measured up there, I checked the width of this shape. And when I went off like that at that kind of an angle, it was that width plus, like another quarter of it or so that I could see before I hit that point. So I'm going to put that point in tentatively there and build my shape off of that. And I may find that that was way too drastic, but it's going to give me something to compare against, something to start with. Yeah, already I think I've got something to fix here, but at least I've got something, right? Now I can start making comparisons like, here's this big shape. Well, like that point there of the shape to this point, I'm saying, in what I've just tentatively laid down, that what else do I have? It's that length. From that point to that point is the same. Maybe even slightly longer. So let me check it. Point to that point. Nope, this is much longer. So when I go like this, up like that, this line comes to like here, right? This line, this dark line here should be down. Or this point here should be up to where it was when I saw it. So like there. Which one is it? That feels choked to me. I'm going to check this angle real quick. So I have this angle, this like 2 o'clock angle. When I look up there, get my skewer, it's like that. Yeah, so I'm well off on that angle. This should be maybe the same distance, maybe a little more, but more like that angle. So like this. I'm going to run a vertical from this angle down just to see what it runs into. Right into that triangle. So I think that's probably more correct. Where does this angle break happen? It's a gentle curve, but it happens right about, it's like up above this a ways. It's like, I feel pretty good about where that's at. I'm checking the height of this. How high is this? When I checked it on the measurement, or when I checked it on the reference, when I took this measurement and brought it down to this shape, it looked like that. There was that much of that shape left over. So I'm going to go back up and go, I probably have this too tall. I feel decent about this. Yep. So this to that. So this comes down. And there's no saying how long that stick is, so I'm just going to leave that negative shape because I don't want to, it kind of doesn't matter. I'll just get rid of this initial line. Okay, anybody who's on YouTube who can, in the chat, just let me know if you're from Beginning Drawing, Art 7, because we've got some stuff to talk about, but if there's nobody from Beginning Drawing on the YouTube, then I may just continue this figure stuff. So I'm doing this shape up above the head, independent of the little fingers that are dipping in, just to get the basics, and then I'll cut those parts out of it. Here we go again. That's pretty close. Yeah, this is like my go-to measurement. That little one, I've used it like 20 times at this point. If I go straight here, where does this negative shape start down here? It's like if I drop a straight vertical off of that point, it's somewhere there-ish. It's straight vertical from this intersection down to the start of this negative shape out here. If I keep going, ooh, it lines up vertically with the, it's through here to that knee. So if I go that bump shape to that, all three of those, the front of this, wherever this point starts, and that one all share a vertical. So I feel relatively comfortable about the vertical location of this thing, or like, you know, side to side where it's at. I still need to worry about the distance though. So if I check this point to that point, please be what I think. Oh no, never mind. That's more than I thought. All right, it's another one of these, like this distance. Oh, that's pretty close. Thanks, brain. I'm going to check it against something else I know is this distance, which is this up here. Just going to check the reference. Checks out. So this to there. Am I right? It's a little bit longer. Maybe just a tad lower. All right, I feel good about that. You'll notice I've just ignored a whole bunch of nose facial feature stuff. I will get that here in a second, but I want to make sure it's located correctly. I'm just kind of getting, again, just the broad strokes here. Not trying to draw facial features here. I'm just getting the zigzag of what I'm seeing. Bit of a mess up here. Don't want that to show up, so I'm going to take it back a little bit. I don't want this negative shape to connect to that one. I want to break right here so they seem to be floating. I could maybe make a sliver of a negative shape there just to make the back feel a little better. But I don't think that's entirely necessary. I think I'm going to go ahead and leave it there. So try not to get it super distorted. Not perfect. Probably still have some work to do down in here. Probably a little bit up here just to kind of refine what's going on there. Something in here bugs, but the head's also sort of tilted towards us. So I'd probably go back and just double check that my size on this and stuff is correct. But this will get me there more or less. You saw the process was gesture, and then it was about building those negative shapes up on top of the gesture. I never drew a single... After that gesture, I never drew a single thing on the figure after that. I was just looking at these pass-through spots and trying to make them as specific as I can. The thing to remember is not that you're really ever going to draw a full drawing like this, as like, maybe you will, maybe you'll be negative shapes person. But it's that you don't gain the sensitivity to negative shapes that you need if you don't force yourself to go in and adjust and change and deal with them deliberately over time. So let this assignment be that. It's going to be one of the things that I'm looking for. So I'm looking for careful evidence of measuring, as you saw me, a willingness to change things. So for instance, I've got some correction lines like that shape. These lines that are like they ended up having to get moved and stuff. As long as your final statements about the negative shapes are clear, then I'm fine, right? Then you've done what you're supposed to do. And if I can see that you've shifted things, even though I still see the ghost of the old line, that's actually a good thing. I can see that you did the measuring, you did the changing that you needed to do. If I see a gesture with a really overly simplified negative shapes drawing right on top of it with no corrections whatsoever, I go, this person wasn't willing to really make the corrections or measurements necessary. I can see there are some proportional issues. They either just didn't see them because they weren't taking time or measuring carefully, or didn't care to change them because they were like, I can't be changing all kinds of shapes. It's too much work. Right? Either one of those things you don't want. What I will say that you could do at this point the drawing is come back in. So I'm just rolling this kneaded eraser out on the drawing. At this point, you could come in really have some like line variety. I've already got the exactly what I want for my negative shape. Line variety isn't going to be quite as important in this drawing as clarity, but there's still room to have some of these lines that come and go. It'll feel a little more drawing-y. See how this negative shape is really starting to clear up in a way that these ones are still kind of, because I let my pencil get a little bit dull, a lot of these lines are kind of fuzzy still. They're kind of specific, kind of clear. They'd be more, more or less fine in the end result. But if I really wanted to take this up a notch, doing that ghosting with the eraser, and just clarifying these lines with a sharp pencil, that would be really helpful. If I do this the rest of the drawing, it's going to seem super deliberate, super inevitable, right? It's going to look like I really was confident about what I was saying here in a way that I'm maybe not down here where it's still kind of fuzzy, right? All right, I'm going to call it there for figure. Last call for beginning drawing, folks. If there's nobody in live stream, then I do see 10 playbacks, but I don't even know what that means. I'm looking at concurrent viewers on the YouTube. Nobody popped into the Zoom. This is a tough week too, you beginning folks. We're dealing with linear perspective. So anyway, Jonathan, that's it for figure. Good luck. Oh, for some reason you're unmuted, but I can't hear you. What? Oh. There we go. All right, last call for beginning folks. Maybe some of my concurrent viewers are not logged in. I guess that's possible. All right, so for beginning drawing, folks, since there's nobody in the chat specifically and nobody in the Zoom, I am just going to draw I'm going to do a couple of box examples in the various linear perspective systems and call it good. If nobody has any questions or there's nobody, sort of appears to be nobody here, I'll do a couple of those examples just to sort of reiterate what we went over this week, and then I'll leave you to it. All right, I think I'm going to We'll split this page into thirds more or less, just to talk about the three different systems. All right, so we will start here. This is going to be one point perspective. Called 1 point because we only use 1 point on our eye level line. So you'll remember in perspective drawing, you have this eye level line, sometimes called the horizon line as well. This represents the distant horizon, but it also represents the level your eyeballs sit at. Right? This is the height of you. And so everything you draw, when you draw something above this eye level line, you're saying this is above me, this is taller than I am. Something below is this is below me, shorter than I am, or below where my eyes are. In 1 point perspective, we make use of 1 point. I'm going to make it obvious there. Let's look off to the side here real quick. 1 point perspective, if I'm looking down from above, 1 point linear perspective has to do with straight-edged objects like cubes, buildings, vehicles, manufactured stuff that has straight lines, that makes use of straight lines. And if I'm looking down at my head, there's my nose, here's my eyeball, here's what I see with my eyeballs. Right, this is me standing there looking forward. 1 point perspective is useful when I have objects that are facing me straight on. So there's my rectilinear object from above. Right, I'm looking at it straight on. Like that. So this is my top-down view. Oh, my handwriting's terrible. Top-down view. So what I'm saying is I'm looking at these objects are facing me. I'm looking at the flat, straight edge of this object. And when we're drawing in 1 point perspective, the way we build an object like that is we draw the shape of it first, and then we relate it to this distant vanishing point. So for instance, if I'm looking at a cube, and we're going to stick with cubes because they're kind of easy to deal with. Or we'll, rectangles. Doesn't have to be a perfect cube. I'm saying there is my rectangle. I see it perfectly straight on. Right? That's the front face that's facing me. That's this face here. Now, what I'm saying here is, here's my vanishing point. This is where if I look straight ahead, that's where my eyeballs would be in the far, far, far distance if I just carried in on a straight line walking. This object is off to the right of me, which means if it's off to the right of me, I'll see this front face, but I'll also see a little bit of the side, right? If I had something, I have a box I can use. Yeah. Here's me looking at something straight on. Here's me moving it. See how I can now see the side? Boom. Now I can't see the side anymore. Now I can see this side, right? That's what happens in 1 point perspective. You can see the sides. If I go above, I can see the top. Right? Now my eye level is above this thing. I can see the top of it. If I go below, I can see the bottom. Right? Boom. Boom. Like that. So, in order to relate this, in order to get the feeling that this is sitting in space, I have to figure out what to do with this side, right? Like, let's say maybe I see that much of the side. This is where your vanishing point comes in handy, because what I'm saying is I see some of the side of this. You'll notice on the screen here, Here's the front edge. We know this is the same, right? It's the same width going front to back. And yet when I turn it like this, see how this gets smaller? This back edge is much smaller than this front edge. And that's maybe the fundamental rule of all perspective is stuff that's far away is small and stuff that's close is bigger than that. Right? So we see this getting smaller, but it's not just getting smaller, it's getting smaller very specifically. If I carried this on into the future, boom, there would be a point back here at which these two edges converged. That point is my vanishing point. That's where my eyeballs would be far in the distance. So what that looks like for our purposes here, I said this was the back edge. I'm going to use a ruler for this just because it's a little more exact. There's my back edge. I'm going to come back with the Prismacolor Ebony pencil and just make this, it's already got a little bit of a human touch to it, but I'm going to give it some more human touch because I like my drawings to have a sense that a human being drew them rather than a bunch of perfectly straight ruler lines that are really sterile and don't feel that organic or that human made, so to speak. So I'm going to come back, just add a little bit of clarity and a little bit of a sense that, hey, there was a person who drew this. If you're drawing something that needs to be really precise, you can use a ruler. It's fine. Like if it's the edge of a building or something, you don't want to look like it's made of clay. You can come back in and just use the ruler. I would just say don't make the same bold line everywhere, you know, kind of make it a little more interesting. So here's essentially it was this thing, my pencil sharpener, into perspective. It shows you the relationship of these edges to that vanishing point. Now, if I want something to be to exist in the same space and facing me just like this one is, all I have to do is draw another rectangle or square or whatever and relate it back to that vanishing point in the same way. So what I'm saying here is this object is above me and off to the side of me. So it's like this. Notice I can see the front here and the side and the bottom. I can see three sides of this thing. Oops. So I need to make sure that happens in my drawing as well. And the way that I do that is here I have a top edge. It goes to the vanishing point. Bottom edge goes to the vanishing point. Other bottom edge goes to the vanishing point. How much of this am I seeing? Let's say not much. I make a line here for the back edge. It's also vertical. So one thing you'll notice here, vertical, vertical, vertical. Right? Those all match, even though this is getting smaller, that's getting smaller. All of the verticals are still perfectly vertical. So vertical, vertical, vertical. The bottom is also horizontal and horizontal. So I'm looking at this edge and this edge. It's almost like 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And then these three all go back to that point. Anyway, so there's my other object in this space, and I'm just going to firm it up. Heck, if I want to do for this one, I could make the bottom a little darker. Just make it feel like I see it's the underside of it. So what I'm saying to us viewer here is you're also looking at this box. These two boxes are aligned with each other. They exist in the same space. And I'm looking kind of at both of them. This one's off to my left and up a little bit. This one's off to my right and kind of like sitting on the ground dead even with me. Other option. Here's one that's down below me. and just a little bit off to the left. And we'll say I see that much of it. This back needs to be vertical. It's really tempting right here. This is something I see a lot. It's really tempting right here to go, okay, I need this back edge, and it goes like that. Right? They split the difference there. That is not going to give you, that's not going to be good perspective. That's not going to look correct. You need to be vertical with that. It feels awkward doing it, but that's what you should be doing. It should match this. This corner should be vertical, that one should be vertical, and this one should be vertical. So be careful on these back edges not to sort of scooch them out like that. It'll ruin the perspective immediately. All right, I'll firm this up a little bit. So that's 1 point perspective. It's pretty straightforward. Before you start drawing buildings and vehicles and all of these really complicated things in perspective, it's really helpful to understand just the way cubes behave in whatever perspective you're trying to do. They're a lot more approachable, they're a lot easier to deal with, and as it turns out, almost everything you deal with can be based on cubes. You can visualize all kinds of things inside of a cube and make sense of it perspective-wise, or a series of cubes, or a series of rectilinear things. What I would advise is get super comfortable with the way these behave in this perspectives to where you can almost just, draw them by just freehand them in a way that feels accurate. Once you can do that, then you can sort of start building more complicated shapes. All right. So that's 2 point, or that's 1 point rather. Let's move on to 2 point. Here's my eye level again. This is my top border of the page. There we go. Don't worry about what's above that. So my eyes are on this line. If I do this top down again here, this is my symbol of a person standing up, looking forward. All right, so this is my top down. What this is telling me, what 2 point perspective is good for, is when the objects, these rectilinear objects, are not facing me straight on. It's like this, for example. Right? Same boxes, only now they're twisted and I'm seeing them at an angle. Like that. What do I do in that case? Right? I can no longer draw. I'm not looking at the straight flat edge of something. I'm not looking like this, where it's like there's that shape and there I can see part of it, but I'm still more or less looking at it straight on. Instead, what it's saying is you're looking at it on a corner situation like this. So now I still have my verticals, right? But this edge is getting smaller as it goes this way, and this edge is getting smaller as it goes that way. I hope you can see that with this. I should have a better cube out. This is getting smaller as it goes back. That's getting smaller as it goes back. Well, just like 1 point, lucky for us, it does that relative to a couple of points on our eye level. These are called vanishing points, by the way. Called vanishing points because those are the points to which edges recede, right? Vanishing point, everything that's not facing me here vanishes back to that point when they're all aligned.
everything in this drawing that's not facing me is going to be vanishing back to these 2 points. One side going one way, the other side going the other way. What is facing me? Well, none of the faces actually. Kind of nothing is facing me. So how do I start? That's a good starting question. How I start is I go front edge. Okay, you're my new starting point, the front edge of something. There's the front edge. Now, how do I draw the rest of my box? Well, I know that this front edge is going to get smaller as it goes back. We saw that here. It's going to get smaller towards this vanishing point. And this one's going to get smaller towards that vanishing point. So I can just map that out ahead of time. That's what my edges are going to do. This one's going to get smaller all the way back to there. This one's going to get smaller all the way back to there. For this particular box, all I have to do now is go, okay, where are my sides? Where are my edges? And because I'm making this box up, I can just go, you know what? There's my front edge. Let's say the back edge is here and that back edge is there, maybe slightly wider. Okay. Add my human touch. And I'm done with that box. That's what a 2-point perspective box, if I was looking at this box on an angle and it was relatively big, that's roughly what I would see. So this one sits on my eye level. So I'm saying I'm at eye level with this box. I can't see the top. I can't see the bottom. What can I see? Just one side and the other side. It's like we saw here. What happens when this goes below my eye level? Now I see 1, 2, 3, or above my eye level, 1, 2, 3. I deal with that the same way I deal with the 1-point perspective. Here I am below eye level, and I'm just going to draw this box exactly like I did that one. Only I'm going to have to change something here in a minute. Using the same vanishing points here. Okay, so there's my front edge. Where are my back edges? I'm going to make this up as well. I'm going to say back edge here. And another back edge. Let's make this one quite a bit wider. There. Okay, am I done? Well, no, I'm not done because I got one side and the other side, but where's the top? I don't see the top at all. Oh, well, how do I get the top? The thing I need to remember when the box is above or below my eye level is that there are a separate set, there's another set, I should say, of lines that go back to these vanishing points, and they come off of this edge here and off of this edge here. So if I lay those in, so this vertical here, it has a set from the top, going from the top of that line back to the vanishing points, and the bottom of that line going back to the vanishing points. For this side, I have a set going this way, but I don't have a set that goes this way. So I'm going to throw one in. So there's that line going back to that vanishing point. I need one from here going this way too. So there's that one. Okay, now I have a top. There it is. And if I firm things up, now Now I have a top, side, side. And if I were to do this above the eye level line, it would be the same thing with the bottom. Right, I'd start with my front edge. This would go back towards the vanishing point. That would go back towards that vanishing point. Find an edge. Then I need a bottom for this one. So this needs to go back to that vanishing point. This needs to go back to that vanishing point, and there's my bottom. All right, and a ruler obviously is going to make these much more accurate. So as long as I make use of these two vanishing points, what I'm saying about all of these boxes that I draw like this is I'm seeing the corners of these boxes. I'm seeing them all at an angle like this. Right? One thing to note that we're not going to dig into really, but is actually the case, is that you can use both of these in the same drawing. Right? Because what happens if I have a box that instead of being lined up with these is actually turned and is facing me? Well, then in this case, still use the same eye level line because my eyes still are at the same level. Your eyes can't go to different levels. The boxes can turn, but your eyeballs can't go down and up at the same time unless you're going to be in real trouble if that happens. So this is just a preview showing that you can mix if conditions warrant it, you can mix these perspective systems together. Right? Now I have a box in this arrangement that's facing me. It still exists in the same space because I'm still using the same eye level line, right? As long as your vanishing points sit on this eye level line that you established from the beginning, they will all seem to be inhabiting the same space, so to speak. But for the longest time, I was like, oh, 2-point perspective, everything has to be in 2-point perspective. Only if it's all lined up. Right? If you have something an odd man out that's facing you, it gets its own perspective point, and that works. That's fine. And you run into that when you're drawing like rooms and stuff. You run into this stuff's not perfectly aligned. Some stuff might be 45 degrees to other stuff. You can still make it work. All right, this belongs to that. All right, our final thing is 3-point perspective, and it really is what we just did with 2-point perspective and 1-point perspective, only adding drama. So I'm going to do this one vertically like this. Makes a little more sense to do this one with some more vertical space. In 3-point perspective, basically what you're saying is, whoa, look how tall this is, or whoa, look how much of a drop off I'm looking down. It's really to add that sense of drama of something towering or something going, down into the distance. You're like standing at the top of a building in a cityscape. Everything's going to feel like if you want the viewer to feel like they're going to fall downwards, you make use of this 3-point perspective. Or if you want something to seem like it's just toweringly large, you make use of this 3-point perspective. And all it is those verticals that we used in 1 and 2-point perspective. So these verticals here and these verticals here, they just start to lean, right? They lean this way or this way, depending on what you're doing. So for our purposes here, I'm going to say, look how big, look how towering these things are, is going to be my statement. Oh, there it is. Because we're going to be looking up or looking down here, our eye level, sort of our horizon line, we want it to be either low or high on the page, right? Because essentially what you're saying is with an eye level this low, you're saying get ready to look up. There's a lot of stuff up here to look at. If it was high, if the eye level was way up here, you'd be like, get ready to look down. You're showing us down, right? If you put it dead center, you're going to have a hard time making 3-point perspective feel good because you're not saying, hey, look up or hey, look down. You're not adding the drama. You're kind of splitting it right in half. It's going to be kind of awkward, right? It's not to say you couldn't do it, but it's better practice for us now if you elect to do 3-point perspective to move your eye level either down if you want us to be looking up at something giant, or up if you want us to be looking down at something, deep and recessed. All right, so here's what that looks like. In 3-point perspective, I'm going to have the same sort of 2 points here from 2-point perspective. And then I'm also going to have a third, and I'm going to put it on the page here. Well, you're not going to see it so well, but there we go. I'm going to put it right here, but more often than not, this thing is way off the page. You're just getting, it's much farther off the page than these two. So I'm going to make this, I'm going to draw something in here in 3-point perspective that just kind of takes up this little spot, but I'll use this upper vanishing point this time. So now 3-point perspective, I have 3 points. I have vanishing point 1, vanishing point 2, and vanishing point 3 is way up off the top of the page. All right, so how do I start? Well, I'm going to start off of vanishing point 1, my other pencil, with my front edge. This is just like 2-point perspective. I'm just drawing something in 2-point perspective. So there's my front edge. Okay, well, I'm going to do a 2-point perspective box here, I suppose. Let me make this a little bit. There we go. All right, so off this front edge here. And there. All right, this is similar to the start of that 2-point box I made. I just need to figure out where are my back edges here. This time though, I don't want to match this front edge. Instead, I want to use that distant vanishing point to get these to lean. And this is going to be an exaggerated version of this drawing, but there we go. So instead of 3 verticals, now I have 3 lines that are kind of getting closer together as they go back to this far point. Make my bottom here. Right, and add my human touch, I guess. Right, that's my giant thing, and then maybe I could be like, oh, there's some humans for scale. Right, that's my towering large thing. And if I turn this upside down, it's just what you would get if you did it the other direction. Right, now I have this, maybe those are distant trees, and I have this top of the building that I'm looking down. I'm up above it, and there's kind of this swooping sense of going downwards. This one is a little exaggerated because of how close I have this point relative to these points. So this is normally what I would want is for these points to be much farther out so that I don't get this distortion. 3-point perspective and 2-point perspective both are prone to this kind of stretching, sharp distortion like this. And it just comes from having these points too close together relative to what you're trying to draw. All right, so that's a little overview of 1, 2, and 3-point perspective. Can I get this to do 3-point perspective in? Kind of. You can almost imagine these getting smaller, smaller. I can almost get 3-point perspective out of this. It's pretty subtle. But it's a common thing in 3D video games and stuff. If you look around in a 3D video game, like, what am I thinking of? If I'm playing The Witcher 3 and I'm in Novigrad, that's a game I played. You look around at the buildings, and as you sweep your camera around, as you look up at them, you'll see the walls start to tilt in like this as you look up to make those buildings. It's the way the 3D space works. And that kind of, it highlights it when you look around in games that have a lot of buildings and stuff. You can see those edges on either side start to tilt in, and it gives a lot more grandiose feel to the buildings and stuff. Makes them feel taller and so on. And it's what you see in real life when you're standing in a corner looking at the edge of a building. I mean, go to downtown Fresno and go look at some of those buildings. As you stand there on the corner and look up at this building, you'll see the edges down where you're at are quite wide, and as you look up the building, they get smaller, right? It's that sweeping 3-point perspective. For the drawings that you're going to do, you don't have to use 3-point, right? You can pick between 1-point and 2-point, whatever you feel, but the practice in your sketchbooks is going to be 1-point, 2-point, and 3-point, just to get a feel for the way they work. All right, and since I don't have, there's no YouTube comments, nobody in the Zoom right now, I'm going to call it there for live stream. I will see you folks next week, and good luck.